Let's talk to Peter Hitchens, who's here as a part of the growth sector, I dare say, being in Oxford, because you're going to have the benefit, Peter, very good morning to you, of a new railway line, apparently.
Well, I wish that I thought that we would. I used to travel on that railway line before they madly closed it in 1968. Right. Amazingly, it wasn't on the list of tracks which the awful Lord Beeching had suggested should close on, basically on the orders of the very dubious Tory Transport Minister Ernest Marples. Harold Wilson just closed it, and no one really knows why. And it's particularly disastrous because it was a very rare thing in Britain, a railway line which ran from east to west rather than from north to south, which connected all the main lines out of London, and also had outside Oxford a special bypass for freight to travel east to west across the country, which was also gratuitously and stupidly closed. You have to wonder whether the Ministry of Transport at the time was actually the Ministry for Roads and trying to shut down what had up till then been a very effective railway network. I hope they open the railway again, though it's going to be difficult to do. But the idea that they should concrete over this part of the country and that it will create economic growth seems to me to be doubtful and also rather sad. It's not a beautiful part of the country, it was a very handsome one. And if you're at all familiar with John Bunyan's great classic, Pilgrim's Progress, it is the landscape in which that's set. Doubting Castle, the Hill Difficulty, and all the rest of it, they're all round there. And that's where Bunyan used to walk, and where the whole idea came into his head. And I think people should remember that as they rejoice over building more and more box homes all over that rather, as I say, secluded and peaceful region, which I used to bicycle across. I used to do an annual bike ride from Oxford to Cambridge and become rather familiar with it. But I don't believe myself that this is the way to growth, and I don't think that it will create the sort of economic growth this country desperately needs, of reindustrialization, of people having proper jobs, making a real thing, which they sell to their fellow citizens.
No, I think that's right, and I don't think that many people are actually rejoicing about it, because when we look at the similar idea to expand the Heathrow, which has been talked about for 22 years and nothing's really happened, my initial thought was if they even were to get into actually putting spades in the ground and doing anything around Heathrow, they would immediately, presumably, hurl that entire area around the M25 and around that part of London into a complete sort of gridlock situation, because apparently...
It would be horrible, and also it will destroy lots of habitations. And I keep asking people, why is it exactly that having an extra runway at Heathrow is considered so beneficial for the country?
Right.
I don't see what... Again, there's as with HS2, which seems to be an entirely pointless vanity project, if you want to build railways in this country, and I wish people would, what we need is a medium-speed, reliable intercity network between all our cities and a recreation of the rural net. Which was so important. So many quite major market towns in this country are no longer connected to the railway network, which forces people to rely on cars in a way which is very damaging both to the environment and to their health and to the countryside as a whole. That should be fixed. We made a grave mistake in the 1960s, shutting down that railway network, and we could put it back with the sort of money we're now proposing to spend on basically these vanity projects for which people wish to be remembered. I think that they want monuments. I think is often the case when vast, grand projects are suggested.
Yes, I mean you've got a piece in Spectator that I was just looking at.
Well, it's an old one I dug out because it's still relevant.
Yes, no, but I'm looking at the sort of the viaduct that you've got the steam train on there, and I assume that's no longer there.
No, that's a nice picture of a lovely viaduct in Scotland.
Is it?
Nothing to do with the Oxford to Cambridge line. I don't think that there used to be a sort of crawl over or fly over at Bletchley, but it didn't look anything like as spectacular as that. It's just the usual slightly illegitimate use of pictures by people on the internet.
Excellent. Good to know.
It's a nice viaduct, but
yes, but I mean, I suppose my question then should be: would there be any part of what used to be the railway line between Oxford and Cambridge that they could use, or not really?
Oh, lots of it. Again, when I first started bicycling along it, parts of it still ran. They used to run an extraordinary thing, a Christmas special from Oxford to Milton Keynes for shoppers until privatisation. After privatisation, it began to decay. And in some very strange fashion, which is involving some completely unknown chemical or physical process, the tracks disappeared. I think they evaporated. I know one year they were there.
Sold off by anybody.
They weren't there anymore. Well, your guess is as good as mine. But gradually it got overgrown. There's a very important part of the old track too, round about Bedford, which got built over with houses, right. Which made it very difficult to reinstate. It can be done with a bit of determination and money. It can be done, and it would be a very good thing if it is. Ridiculous that these two beautiful cities are no longer linked by train. It was one of the favourite journeys of C.S. Lewis, the Narnia books man, who used to travel with his brother because he got a professorship in Cambridge, regularly along that line, which he called the crawler. And it was a vital part of the railway system, and it was just, to me, it still remains a sign that we had and continue to have an anti-railway policy in this country. Anybody ever closed it? But I seem to remember the Tories saying they were going to open it as well, just as they went on about the third runway.
Right. Well, this is the thing.
These things are often talked of.
Yeah, they're talked of, but this is the thing. I mean, in the Mail today, the suggestion being there's no chance of this third runway even appearing for 25 years, and that's probably optimistic, I would say.
Well, let me refer here to my home city of Oxford. There's a part of the long-term plan for the Oxford to Cambridge railway line has involved the building of a new platform at Oxford Station, which then involves the building of a wider bridge across the only road which connects the west and the east of the city. Well, they closed it, I think, about 18 months ago now. And the whole place is full of men in orange jackets standing around, and machinery going backwards and forwards with those strange loudspeakers saying "reversing," all the time, day and night. Floodlights, pools of water, hose pipes, cables, diggers. Nothing happens. Right. The town is being divided. There's a thing I call it's a checkpoint where you have to shuffle through a narrow pedestrian tunnel between two sides of the city. Everybody's sick to death of it. Nobody knows when it will ever end. So the idea that they can, if they can't even widen one railway bridge in the centre of Oxford on time, the idea they can build a third runway for Heathrow Airport on time is fanciful. Nothing in this country is done properly anymore, and nobody can find out how this thing got into such a mess. And there's still no real idea of when it will be finished. And I think this is standard in grand projects in this country. Everything takes at least twice as long and costs at least twice as much.
And as you say, it also seems to involve twice as many people. You know, I've got the same problem. There's a building that's been going up next to London Bridge Station. I think it's actually going to be student housing eventually. But they've been working on it for literally years and years and years. And there's a sort of absolute plethora of orange-jacketed characters who stand around directing, and they're called traffic marshals. And I'm like, what are you doing? And all they seem to do is to stop you when you're in a car.
Do you remember the great Keith Waterhouse?
Yes, I do.
The column in the...
I used to drink with him in Costello's. I'm that old.
Well, he once wrote this book of his life. And what the point it made was that gradually the hero discovered that the vast office in which he worked, thousands of people, was completely pointless. He noticed after a while there were no telephones. Nobody could call in. All these people were sitting around. The thing had been created by a government which was incapable of running an economy to pretend that people had jobs. I think an awful lot of the construction industry is pretend jobs, really, to make up for that. We have no proper manufacturing industry. You noticed, I think, probably that during the Great Shutdown, during which we first bonded, that the construction industry was exempt from all the rules of shutting everything down. It carried on completely regardless, which struck me as very interesting. It has a special place in the hearts of politicians because, as I say, it soaks up an awful lot of what would otherwise be unemployment, gives the illusion that this country is industrially active. It isn't, and that's really the problem. If people want to rebuild...
Well, funny enough, I was
rebuilding the industry that was destroyed in the 80s.
Yeah, I was talking to a developer, funny enough, the other day about all this. I said, where are all these buildings that are going up everywhere you look in London and elsewhere? You know, I see housing projects sometimes as well, which I can understand people need houses. But a lot of the high-rises that are going up in London, I was like, who's like buying those? Who's moving into them? Canary Wharf, for example, is largely empty because most of the office buildings are no longer occupied by office workers. And he said basically what they do is they sell kind of, you know, a dividend, or they sell some kind of, you know, property right to own some part of the building that they're putting up, only so that you can sell it on to somebody who might want it in the future. But it's all a bit of a pyramid scheme, it seems to me.
Well, it's worse than that. Let me tell you a story about this. Somebody I know was trying to find someone to live in London, and contacted a estate agent in some part of South London, where a large number of these new blocks have been built, and was being shown around one of the flats, and said to the agent, "What do you think? Do you think this would be a good place to bring up a family?"
Yeah.
And the agent looked at him and said, "Are you crazy? Nobody lives here. These places are not built for people to live in. They're purely assets for investment purposes.
Right.
If you move in here, you'll have no neighbours."
Right. And that's the thing.
You look at those blocks, and that's the way it looks to me.
Yeah, because there aren't people. There aren't people in them. There's an entire building that went up next to our office here, built by the same sort of architect, and it looks very similar to our office building, but it's been finished and completed for at least the time that I've been working here, which is a good 4 or 5 years, and there's not one flat occupied. Not one of them has got anybody in it.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the housing which is built with the constant frenzy that the government has for building houses all over the countryside remains empty. It seems to me for a lot of the time, and it or is too expensive for normal people to buy when it's completed.
Yeah.
The idea that we will get ourselves out of economic trouble by building lots of houses and destroying large parts of our countryside forever, because you can't get it back once it's been built over, again, seems to me to be wholly fanciful and gravely mistaken. And this pressure on people, you mustn't oppose the destruction of this woodland. You mustn't stand in the way of this development, because this is vital for the national development, and you're wrong to do it, and you're a NIMBY and despicable. I think this whole
it's a very big state, isn't it?
What preserve the environment as obstructive is very, very dangerous, and we will regret it greatly. Just as, the 1960s, huge amounts of hideous concrete development was allowed all over the place, which still spoils many towns and much of the country.
Well, look at Barbican now. It looks awful.
The same sort of pressure. We must build, and then you have this hideous stuff, which it would take high explosive or more to actually get rid of.
Yeah.
And it's lost forever.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. We've got to go, but thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens there on all manner of things, including growth.